Hello, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for volunteering your time to join us on this call. Wherever you are in the world, no matter what time it is, you're at work, you're not at work, you're spending your time here to listen to our esteemed speakers and to hopefully come away with some new knowledge. If I could just really quickly start off with a little bit of housekeeping, if I could ask everybody to mute themselves, just so that we eliminate some background noise as people talk, that would be extremely helpful. How we're going to work today, let me introduce myself first of all. My name is Simon. I work with the Psychology at Work.blog team along with Nikita, and there's a chap called Simon Toms who you'll also notice probably at the top of your screen. And the mission really behind this voluntary group is to try and open up the world of occupational /IO/business/organizational psychology, and lift some of that fog and blow away some of the smoke to really open it up to as many people as possible, to afford opportunities where others may not see them, and to really just try and expand the field and just really spread the wonderful word of this incredible occupation, because I think it offers so much and can be so broad and be so wide-ranging. And exactly on that, today we're going to explore just how wide-ranging that can be with a number of wonderful speakers. We have a 9-month course set out with one session per month. Number one being today. You're here at the very inaugural one, where we explore what it is that occupational psychologists do. We'll go on to explore how to navigate the job market. We'll have a future session on making yourself and your application stand out. We'll hopefully try and get an online job fair on the go. And we'll also explore other things such as navigating rejection and story sharing from those who've been successful. So I hope to see you on future sessions as well. Nikita's going to put the links up at some point towards the end of this session. We've got a lot to get through and many wonderful speakers to fit in. So we're going to jump onto Nikita's Menti really quite quickly. But what I would say is that whilst people are discussing and talking, please use the chat function to put in any questions that pop into your mind. And what we'll do is, after our first speaker, Almuth, speaks, she needs to jump off fairly soon. So we can have a little Q&A section with her if you've got anything specific about what she said or academia in general. And then at the end of the session, we can also have a more group conversation with the rest of our speakers around any questions that you may have in order to keep things running. So thanks again for joining us, and Nikita, back over to you.
Thank you, Simon, for such a wonderful introduction. So yes, this is the first event, one of many, and I will pop the links in. So good people, first off on Mentimeter. So if you can go into menti.com and put in that code or scan a QR code to your right, and that will get you to Menti. And then if you can press the little heart, so I know you're in. Oh, lovely, loads of hearts, love it. There's also 83 of you on this call, 83 people who volunteer for another Zoom call. Now, if that's not a self-selecting sample, I don't know what is. So it'd be really fun to find out from you good people, where are you based right now? UK, London, Liverpool, Bristol, Newcastle, Bologna, more Liverpool, Leeds, oh, gotta love Leeds. Where is it? Toronto, India, plot thickens. There's Turkey, Germany. There's loads of different places. Now, one of the key things, I have spoken to students from anywhere from US to India to France. And you know what we all share in common? Our universities, career departments could do better when helping us find a job and navigate the market. I mean, some universities do better than others, but oh my God, you can meet any IO student is like, oh my God, we're a bit struggling. The key thing, if you take any solace, you're not alone. And hopefully we can connect today with fellow students and business faculty, academia, and see how we can make the journey a little bit lighter. Now, talking about making the journey a little bit lighter, what would you like to explore about what jobs OxPsychs, IO business psychologists do? So if you can type in, if you have any burning questions or what made you come here today, and what would you like to explore? What would be of particular value? How to get your foot in the door. Perfect. I absolutely love the fact this is the first point, because that's what you start with. And we'll definitely explore this. Workplace design. Oh, I have this guy called Giuseppe. You should definitely chat to. Consultancy. What are the different areas? Oh boy, there is a lot. What they really do. That's a good question to
That's
start
my
with.
favorite one so far, because I often thought this when I was studying as well. You know, what is the day-to-day look like? What is it that you guys actually do? So I'm really excited to explore this with our speakers today.
Consultancy for academics. Sounds like a good title for a consultancy, to be honest. What else? What should areas we're applying for? Transition from other professions. So just to address a couple of those, on our YouTube channel, we actually have a video on how to search for your first job in OxPsych, and also how to use LinkedIn. Transitioning from a different field, we already had 4 seminars last year with about 11 OxPsychs sharing their journeys of transitioning from other careers. All of this is on our YouTube channel. So please, when you have next time trouble sleeping, do go to our YouTube channel. It shall really help you put it right to sleep, and you might learn something in the process. So it's wonderful to see such a range of things that people want to explore today. So
one thing that I would say, Nikita, if I may jump in, is I can't stress enough how helpful and the importance of networking with fellow professionals and like-minded individuals. So please, guys, feel free to pop your LinkedIn link in the chat function. If we can get some people connected tonight, it would be fantastic.
Are you okay? Yeah. Oh, nice haircut.
I'm really happy, Sana, you saw somebody with a good haircut.
What a shame we can't get to see it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. We're intrigued. So yeah, excellent.
Okay. Peter, just look at the message I've just sent you.
Excellent.
And it means to stay happy. Sakshi is stuck in the lobby, she says.
Oh, she's already in.
Ah, okay.
Cool. We're all in. It's wonderful when all the speakers turn up. And on that note, Simon, would you care to?
Yes, without further ado, let me, with huge pleasure, introduce the first of our speakers tonight, Almuth McDowall. You probably have heard of her or seen her on some sort of media. Almuth is a professor of organisational psychology at Birkbeck, where she leads her department and is part of her school's executive team. She's a chartered psychologist. Recent assignments include support of senior leadership teams through organisational change. Internal activities include leadership of the department, contribution to the schools and colleges, REF preparation activities. And it'd be lovely to hear as well about your ballet past as well, if we can go into that too. But Almuth, over to you. What a pleasure to have you here.
Okay, everybody, thanks so much for having me. Could I just do a quick sound check? Can you all hear me okay? Because it's quite noisy where I am in the background.
It's okay, we can hear you just about.
Lovely, lovely, great. So also saw some familiar names popping up. Lovely to have people like Glyn in the room, who of course know what I do. So let me just give you a little bit of an insight of what it is like to be an academic. By the way, could I just have a bit of a reaction from the room? Are any of you mad enough to be considering a career as an academic? Just give me a thumbs up. No? Don't blame you. It's not for the faint-hearted. So what do I do on a day-to-day basis? So I'm Professor of Organisational Psychology, have just stepped down as head of department. Okay, so Mina, you're interested, great, lovely. So really focusing on research and on teaching at the moment, and also consultancy. So given my background in ballet, and given that I still teach ballet online these days, no longer face-to-face, I really have a very strong affinity still with the performing arts, and building on the research that we've done across all performing arts, we have just done a big piece of research. You can find the report on the Parents in Performing Arts website about how parents juggle their lives in classical music. We called it a bittersweet symphony, more bitter than sweet, because there is still a lot of prejudice against parents. There's still this notion of the tortured genius in the arts, so that you have to give the arts your everything, and you can't possibly do that once you become a parent. So go and read the report if you're interested. In terms of consultancy, I'm doing two rather large, one of them a confidential piece, so I can't say too much about it. I'm working with the police at the moment at a national level on the national lever framework, and what I've been consulting there on is a framework for good retention practice. So the police has been in a very fortunate situation over the years, in that they've had very little attrition, so people tended to stay until they retired and then they went. That is slowly but surely changing, and in particular they're losing some of the people whom they really don't want to lose. So people who are female and ethnically minoritized are much more likely to leave. So we are putting together a toolkit to underpin good practice in exit interviews, a template for an exit survey, and also similar templates for a retention interview, which would come in a little bit earlier, and a retention survey. Alongside, I'm also working with another university, really sharing some of my insights as previous head of department, as an academic leader, and supporting them through what really is a very intense period of change, where morale hasn't been all that good. The transition to digital education for all of us in education meant in reality managing huge change projects, but with rather minute budgets. So the consultancy work that I'm doing in terms of research, my research interests really are broadly around diversity, occupational health, and in particular neurodiversity, but also coaching and professional competence. And I'm working on each of these streams at the moment. So I direct a research center for neurodiversity at work, and we're doing a big national survey at the moment, partnering with Neurodiversity in Business. They are a charity. And by the way, the call is still live. You can find it anywhere on LinkedIn or social media. If you're working in defense, if you're working in food, in retail, basically kind of in non-office jobs, please complete our survey. We would love to hear from you. In terms of my research on coaching at the moment, I'm co-editing a special issue on coaching in Jube. Jube is one of the 4-star journals, one of the best ones in our domain, and one of the senior editors. So if you've got any research on coaching, well, consider submitting to us. And in terms of professional competence and that trend of my research, I'm working on a longitudinal project at the moment, tracking the journey of police officers who come into a graduate route, so who got selected into the police from a previous background in finance, in banking, and come in at slightly more senior levels than you would usually expect. And we are tracking them over time and pooling together quantitative and qualitative data. So that's what I do. That's the real me. What do you need to be like to be in academia? Well, I guess I'm probably slight off-ball in that I came into academia having had my performing arts experience, but also consultancy and industry experience. I'm a genuine believer that course, I would say that it actually makes me a better academic, because that experience keeps me grounded. In terms of personal qualities, what do I need to have? An awful lot of tenacity and resilience. It's a tough environment, particularly as a woman at relatively senior level. Glass cliffs, oh yes, I've known a few. But we would really like you to take this on. And guess what? It's a poison chalice. So I had to become much more discerning about what I take on and what I say yes to over the years. So I hope this has been a reasonable insight, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Almuth, so much. Are there any questions from the group at all? Feel free to pop them in the chat. Whilst you do think about any questions before we lose Almuth, I'll ask a couple. For someone entering their academic career, Almuth, how would you describe, or what would you say their expectations should be of the workload and also the balance of work? How much is on research? How much time do you need to dedicate to teaching and preparing that teaching? And how much time do you do doing other things like administration work?
It really varies. So most academic research posts, certainly in the UK, are predicated on what we call a 40-40-20 model. So if you do 40% teaching, 40% research, and 20% what we call leadership and service. So as program director doing, committee membership, and over the years, how that has played out has really varied. So in my first academic post, I dare say it was 80% teaching. They got a lot of value for money, which meant that I had very little time to build up my research and publication career. When I was head of department, I'd say that about 60% of my time probably was spent on leadership, and then the rest on teaching and research. It's a sad reality for most of us academics, that sometimes the research that we do at the weekend, we do it during the holidays, and then it's a pretty common story to tell. Yeah. And I think you just need to have your eyes open and know that that's the bargain that you're entering into.
Yeah. I have a question here from Zainab. I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. What was the biggest challenge that you've had in your career, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, the biggest challenge. I guess I took a courageous decision when I took up my current post at Birkbeck, because I took a demotion to come to Birkbeck from a senior lectureship to a lectureship, because I always really, really wanted to be at Birkbeck. And I thought, you know what, actually, states or anything, it doesn't matter to me. So it was a real gamble, because I had to start again, right? At the bottom of the ladder. And I didn't, at the time have a high profile program leadership or anything like that. So that was a gamble and a challenge, and it was a little bit of a jittery ride, but actually the gamble paid off, because I think, David Bletchman said at my inaugural lecture, which is a fancy thing that you do when you become a professor in the University of London, that actually in all my experience, Almuth's trajectory to professorship has been the fastest one I've ever witnessed.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, as a previous student at Birkbeck, I'm extremely grateful that you did make that leap. So thank you for doing that. A question from David Ward. You mentioned some poison chalices that you've experienced before. Did you notice any red flags that you learned from those, as a point of experience and learning and wisdom that you can pass on? Or on the other hand, any green flags that mean a project is going to be a good one?
So red flags that I had to learn. One thing that I definitely have learned is that academic environments are not very good at managing underperformance. It's tolerated in the system, and everybody kind of knows that there are people there who are not pulling their weight, and you have to be a bit careful because there's some ex-students in the room. But it's just something that, in a sense, is grit in the system, that everybody knows it's there and that it's tolerated. And one of the things that actually I kind of made a mission when I came in as head of department. It was like, actually, I'm not going to stand for that, because if there are some people not pulling their weight, that will have an impact on other people who do, and we need to divide workload very equitably and fairly. And when I shared some of these goals with higher up the table, said, yeah, great, Almuth, you go for it and you do it. But guess what, Simon? It was me doing it, and there was very, very little support. So, with the beauty of hindsight, which is always a wonderful thing, I should have been much clearer. It's like, great, okay, so you've given me the thumbs up. You said you're going to support me. Exactly how are you going to support me, right? What actually are you going to do that will help me manage that task, and being much clearer about that? In a sense, yeah, more managerial, but really also making sure that I have the support that I needed to do this, rather than doing it all on my own.
I'm gonna ask one more question before we say thank you and sign off, and I want to leave it on a positive one. And I would like to understand what the best thing about your job is. What do you love most about it?
What do I love most about my job? It's seeing the impact that good education can have on people's lives, and genuinely transforms people's lives, and actually having that real life experience. I don't think I will ever, the joy that it brings, it's like unlike anything else. And sometimes it can be really small things, such as having a personal conversation with a student and trying to help them to work through a personal issue. Or Birkbeck is very unique because really, particularly at postgraduate level, a lot of our students come to us because they've fallen out of love with the work that they're doing, and they want to think about a career change, and actually seeing that unfold, in front of you is just one of the most rewarding things. It really, really is.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I definitely fit into that category as a second career in occupational psychology, and Birkbeck definitely lit that fire for me. So yeah, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much, Almuth, for your time tonight. It's been a huge pleasure. Continue, please, all of your attendees to put questions in, and we can try and address them either during the session or even afterwards as well. Once again, Almuth, thank you very much indeed. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Almuth.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody. I'm going to stay on the call, but switch my video off now, okay?
By the way, Almuth, if you don't mind, some people asked for the link to the survey. If you could pop it in the chat, that'd be very much appreciated.
Okie dokie. I would try and do that on my phone. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, let's crack on to speaker number 2. And I'm absolutely delighted to say, fresh off being a keynote speaker at the recent ABP conference, we have Sakshi Bansal, who's the recipient also of the Diana Award, which is the highest civilian award for humanitarian work across the globe. She's also the world's first UNESCO Kindness Leader and a founder of Project LEAP, a social service project committed to SDG 4, and an occupational psychologist. She spends her time consulting on a variety of topics. Sakshi, over to you.
Thank you. It's never not going to be embarrassing to listen to that very formal introduction. Interestingly, I also have a background in performing arts. I did salsa for 10 years. So I guess there is something about performing arts and the love for that gets you here. But thanks, Simon. I'm currently working with primarily a design engineering company. But now we are a sustainable development consultancy, which means anything to do with sustainability, we are on it. So Elizabeth Rail, for those of you who are in London, might have heard of Elizabeth Line. Opera House in Sydney, Sagrada Familia in Barcelona are just some of our projects. So really good structures around the world. And my journey into this career and into this job has been a bit of a up and down. So I've worn many hats, and I'll quickly go through those because there are different hats that you can wear as a psychologist. So I know some of the questions relate to that. I started my career as a startup founder in artificial intelligence, and I was contributing by understanding how to sell the business and understanding what people actually need on the side of technology and innovation. So that's one kind of consultancy I did as a psychologist. Then I moved into talent assessments consulting, which was large and small volume recruitment projects. And my day-to-day was listening to client requirements on what kind of employees do they need, why do they need them, what skills they need to have, and then sharing the best practice with them or looking at some assessments that they can use. Also, I was doing some leadership coaching, some assessments, how can leaders actually do the things that they promise and move towards excellence. And different people understood different kinds of leadership. Some organizations wanted authentic leadership. Some organizations wanted kind leadership. So really exploring what that means for that organization and creating a solution that will work for them. Now, sometimes that may look like just creating a value framework and value structure for them. These are your nice values, and this is what you can tell your employees. Or sometimes that looks like going into the organization, working with them for 6 to 10 months, and really embedding those values. So looking at how the employees interact with each other day to day, how do they use technology, what are the challenges they're facing, bringing them back to the table, and again, working with the leaders to figure out what's the next way forward. So really embedding yourselves in the business. Then I started doing change management and consulting. So I was designing and facilitating workshops that included working with clients across the globe. So Australia, Toronto, Berlin, and looking at what kind of change transformation processes they're going through. Now, as a student, I really wanted to be in this change space. You know, it always seemed very exciting, the change and the culture aspects of things. But very quickly, I realized that it is a little bit boring and probably not what I was expecting. Because what it makes you do is look at technology. What are people using? Do they know how to use SharePoint? Can they use Teams? Is the laptop speaking to the other laptop in the other office? What are the day-to-day processes like? You know, really logistical processes, really monotonous day-to-day processes, and making sure they're there and they're excellent so that the company can change and work. So I got bored, left, and I really got tired of being asked the question, what do we actually do as psychologists? As you can imagine, even after 5 years into the industry, still getting asked the question, what is your actual job and what do you actually do? And I got really tired of it a few years ago. So I started asking businesses the questions, what is it that you want? And I didn't tell them what I'm going to deliver. I just asked, what is it that you want? And I started working with other sectors like finance, sustainability, logistics, and operations, and providing the human side of consulting to them. So that's what I do at Arup. That is why I joined Arup, because I work with a team that does business investment. So when two big corporations are merging, for example, recently I worked on a project where two energy sectors in Europe are merging together, two very big companies, and I look at everything for them. Is it the right decision to merge with this company? How does their organizational structure look like? Where do the leadership capabilities lie? Are the leaders capable of doing this change? What is your strategy to grow the business in terms of recruitment? Do your people have the right skills and capabilities? Can we do some analyses for you? What does your social and governance look like? What are the aspects of sustainability that you're promising? What is the story you're telling to people? Is that the right story? Everything. And this all you can do based on what you know about psychology and about people, about businesses. So this is the kind of stuff I do at Arup now. So I work very closely with the investment team, very closely with the asset operations team, which basically means they understand the core of the business. And I'm able to link my value as a psychologist to the triple bottom line: productivity, power, and profits of a company. As long as you are able to link, I think, your value to this triple bottom line, you won't be asked the question anymore of what is it that you actually do, because people really want that, right? Businesses really want to take care of their triple bottom line. So finding links to that part of the business is quite important. Apart from that, I do a lot of research as well. You can't ever run away from research when you're in this field, because you constantly want to figure out what's the best practice, make sure you're consulting on the right things, and also want to contribute and sort of take the learnings that you're getting from the businesses and apply it academically. So I do a lot of research. Recently, I've done a bit of research around career crafting and how to pivot your careers. So one of the issues that I found in my personal career was all these different things that I was doing, but also that charity work that I was doing that was very important to me, and how I could merge both of those. So I started looking at this field called humanitarian psychology, which is basically using your degree and expertise for social impact. So now I work with humanitarian psychologists. I sit on the board there, and what that looks like is looking at the scope of humanitarian psychology in different parts of the world. So I work with admissions committee, with PhD students to understand what is their social impact based on their experience and expertise. How does that really impact the world? What metrics can we use to measure that impact? And then finally, looking at some research pieces around that. I'm also from University of Nottingham, so haven't seen the Birkbeck magic, but have met a lot of people that have the Birkbeck magic. And I know I recognize a lot of names in this group that are from UN. So I am doing an alumnus session next week for University of Nottingham, so just contributing that way as well, as a psychologist and international student, so giving back to the international students community, I guess. And I continue to do a lot of those workshops, design and delivery across the globe. The other part of my life, which usually happens after 10 p.m., is advising startups, because I come from a startup background with my own startup in artificial intelligence. I still want to work with startups, and they have this intense phase of growth that they experience when they go from 5-6 people in a room or in a shed to 100 people company. And usually these people that run these startups are people who understand engineering, technology, finance really well, but very rarely do they understand people and organizations. And so that's my job, to help them in their scale up and growth up phase, so that, again, they don't make the mistakes that usually startups are making. And that again brings in the part of research. So if you're really good at researching what the issues are in organizations currently or going to be, or what the issues are with startups, you are then able to link your practice to what their issues are or will be, and you're able to deliver on that value. There's a long, very, very long journey that I'm not going to get into today about how all these things, I got to all these things and how they actually came into my life. But that's for another day. But
that's a different session, which I hope you'll be able to join us on, because that sounds fascinating. Yeah,
happy to. Thanks, Simon. Back to you.
Oh, thank you so much. What a huge amount to unpack from that that short speech. Absolutely riveting, and I was really fascinated and interested to hear your feedback about change management being so logistical and tech orientated. I had always assumed that consultancy is always going to sort of lean quite heavily into sort of the psychology behind everything, but it's really fascinating to hear that it's much more. It's completely holistic, and that's not just from a change management project, I assume. Is it possible? Perhaps it's not, because there's so much variety. But what's a day in the life of Sakshi? What's a typical day? Like, how do you do these projects? And then when you go to a client or you get given a project, who do you speak to? What's your process?
I think the life of the consultant, and you will hear this over and over again, is every day is different. But to make some sense out of your different days, you need to have this basis of asking the right questions. So anytime, even if it's a colleague or a client, I have a set of questions I always ask. What is it that you exactly want? Can you give it to me in 3 points? Why do you need this? Till when do you need this? and what value are you going to get out of it? As long as they can answer these questions, I can get on with the task. If even one of these questions is not answered, my task is first to find out the answers to that question. So that allows me to get a frame of reference, to find out in this maze where to get to. The second is really having colleagues or your network that you can bank upon. I have a couple of people in the industry. Whenever I have a question, I always text them. Always, as a standard. Even if I know the answer, I text them because they will always provide me with a different perspective. Similarly, in my company, I have a couple of different people that I always go to and bother them. And it's very important for me to get those perspectives. So I get those perspectives. And then the third and the most difficult part is writing it into a slide deck usually, and sending it across to the client. And what 9 out of 10 happen is client is like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What does that mean? What does that mean? And that's when your research comes in and you go, I'm not just saying this, here's a research basis of this. I'm not just saying this, this is the industry, this is what the industry is saying. So there's a lot of back and forth in the day, but you get used to that maze as long as you have your questions and your people.
One last question, and perhaps we can have sort of, as I said, like a group Q&A if we have time at the end. How much of your time, for someone who's interested in consulting, because there's so much excitement and variety and interest, but how much of your time is spent client side? Do you get much time at home? Do you have to travel a heck of a lot?
Depends company to company. At my last job, I was remote working mostly. And when things opened up, it was maybe once in a month at client side.
Oh.
But that was because of the nature of the work I was doing. At the current job, always with a client every day. Mostly they're in the office, which is why I'm always dressed in a blazer. And I spend at least 60% of my day with my clients. 20% of it is actually working on things when you're not in meetings, and the rest 20% is figuring things out. So it never really stops.
I've got a question from Anna, actually, which I will ask because it's just popped up now. Regarding all the different roles that you've worked, what's a personal skill or a soft skill that you think was valuable for you in order to develop early in your career?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm going to focus on the fact that it's developed early. So I wouldn't give this advice to somebody who is 6 years into this career, but first 5 years into your career, say yes, figure it out later. I think a lot of people think too much about the risks, about the X, Y, and Z involved, and opportunities pass them by. My way of working has always been say yes, figure it out later, and maximum times you will figure it out.
Good advice. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sakshi. Absolutely, fascinating. Let's move on swiftly to our third speaker, Rachel Frost. Let me just say a few words about Rachel. So Rachel is the managing director and principal psychologist of RFL. Having founded the company in 1998, she continues to manage client assignments as well as personally coaching and assessing senior leaders and staff. Rachel, tell us a little bit about your day-to-day and your experiences of the working life.
I've actually prepared a slide because I found it easier to put it on into a slide.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Hang on. Did everyone see that?
You got it.
I'm just trying to get rid of the chat. Okay, it's gone. So probably a discussion for another day, but no prizes for guessing why somebody would become slightly obsessed with finding ways of fairly and accurately defining who somebody is. And this really has been my absolute obsession throughout. So the starting point for everything I do is to paint that portrait of an individual interpersonally, intellectually, and personally. So I always say to candidates or coaches, if I was an artist, I'd sit here and paint your picture and say that's what you look like. Instead, my whole objective is to neutrally and accurately get together. So interpersonally, so everything to do with, you know, how you interact with other people. So the people side of leadership, the people side of management, negotiating, influencing, communication skills, working with others, everything to do with interpersonal skills. Intellectually, so all the aptitude stuff, as well as, you know, crucially, how people approach decision making. So big picture, small picture, how innovative they are, appetite for risk, how they then roll out a decision once it's been made, everything to do with just the sort of decision making and I suppose project management side of things. And then the third thing I'm really interested in is what I call personal qualities. So ethics, values, what sort of kind of big picture motivates and drives someone. And then obviously if they're applicants for a job, then what is it specifically about this job that's kind of jumping out at them, and then any reservations or areas of concern they might have about it. But also handling pressure. So what causes someone pressure, stress, anxiety, boredom? How do they know when they're uncomfortable in a situation? And then kind of crucially, what techniques help them look after their well-being, as well as, you know, continue to make sound decisions when maybe things are not going so well for them. You know, it's a no-brainer that in-depth individual assessment was where I started. So I think, well, a couple of years ago, I calculated I've done about 12,000 individual assessments. Typically, you know, the usual scenario would be senior applicant for a C-suite type position or very specialist. So I do work with police as well, but police who are thinking of going into very specialist positions. So I'm one of a team of psychologists that look at their kind of integrity, resilience, those kind of very precise qualities that they need. So as I say, I kind of did absolutely loads of that and continue to do it, and I love it. And this is, I would say, my absolute kind of core skill. Naturally, this has led to a lot of selection tools design. So I did work as a psychometrician for a psychometric test publishing company at one stage. Nowadays, I tend to kind of do more reviews of other people's selection processes. So today, in fact, I've been working with the Azerbaijan government, looking at how they recruit their civil servants. So I think I've worked with something like 14 international governments doing this sort of work. I seem to have got myself on some sort of list to do it, but it's always interesting, of course, really worthwhile as well. About 15 years ago or so, people started hinting that my skill set was a little bit narrow. As I say, I've literally done thousands of in-depth individual assessments, which is fine, but it was kind of a bit of, you know, can you take it a little bit further? And the further that makes a lot of sense is once you've got that really clear description of someone, you can then start looking at, you know, what's holding them back in their career. How can they push their strengths even further to maximize them? How can they fill in any gaps, any weaknesses? And yes, I do talk about weaknesses. I think, you know, to say everything is a development need is putting a lot of pressure on someone. We have weaknesses. Some of those weaknesses we might choose to develop. Others, it's like, you know, I'm never going to be a ballerina, so why beat myself up trying to do that? So earlier this year, I became a chartered coaching psychologist as well as a chartered occupational psychologist. Prior to the BPS forming the new division, I sort of, I was a master executive coach, the Association for Coaching. So I kind of tagged onto those guys, but now I've found my home more as a coaching psychologist. And I think it sits really nicely with occupational psychology, actually. Yeah, since level A, level B days, so since the 90s, I've been providing training. So currently I run 2UP and 2A, or whatever it's supposed to be called, the BPS accreditation. Got a partnership with Hographer, so we can qualify people in the NEO. And I love this because, you know, this is really a good place for me to get my passion for doing proper assessment out to people. I sit on the BPS test review panel. So when a new test comes to market, I'm part of a team that will sort of open the bonnet on that, have a look at the reliability, put validity, all the usual stuff, and then the BPS pulls together there's normally two reviewers and an editor, pull all that together, and that then gets published as the official review for a psychometric test. One of the areas of work that I find particularly fascinating, and I see it as a bit of fun really, is remote profiling. So this is where I don't get to meet the person, and they normally don't know, well, they don't know that I'm doing a profile on them. So I work for a number of PR and business intelligence firms doing this. So a sort of real life example, there's hundreds of different scenarios, but one of them that comes to mind, two partners who'd worked together for a number of years, built up a very successful, very well-known business. One of the partners wanted out. He was a little bit scared of the other one, and his reaction was likely to be, but also they had a very strong personal bond. In fact, it was a family bond. They were family members. So this guy had gone to the PR company and said, right, can you help me sort of break this business up whilst maintaining the sort of profitability, but also helping me maintain relationships with this person. So in a case like this, the PR firm sends me everything that they know about the person. So lots of videos, lots of newspaper articles. They tend to be very high profile people, as well. Of course, in this example, I had some first-hand discussions with the person. So then, if you like, I'm working backwards. So then I pull together the profile and then kind of advise on, okay, this is the best way to communicate. This is going to absolutely turn him off. If you want to make him angry, this is what you're going to do. So as I said, I've done many different types of examples of that for PR companies and for business intelligence firms, which is where so one comes to mind. There was a company that it was actually actually I can't give too much detail, but there was somebody that was causing a lot of trouble for this company, and they were saying, right, how can we kind of deal with this individual, but without making our PR side of things worse. We ended up coming up with a proposition for her, which involved her actually being on the board of the business. So rather than her chaining herself to railings at the AGM, she actually became a member of the board, and so she helped them, make the decisions, and it was a sort of win-win. And that came out of kind of looking into her profile, her background, her personality. And we came up with this strategy for coming up with a solution. I'm also an operating partner for a venture capital firm. So I don't know whether any of you have ever seen the program Billions. I got a phone call from the founder, who I've worked with on a sort of consultancy basis for many years. And he said to me, so Rachel, have you seen a program called Billions? I was like, brilliant. He said, no, billions, loads of millions, go and have a look at it. And he said, that's what I want you to do. So for those of you who've seen it, you'll know what I'm referring to. So there's somebody called Wendy in the program. So I'm on a retainer with them, and I have been for a number of years now. So we do things like when they're looking to acquire a new business, I'll sit on the due diligence stages of that and look at the leadership team. So the founder of the private equity firm is very big in, it's not about having a good idea, business is only going to be successful if you've got the right team. So I help with that side of things and work with the team who are putting the financials together and so on. And then I continue working with the leaders and the founders of the businesses. They've got about 40 portfolio companies at the moment, and I also work very closely with the venture capital firm itself. So they've got what they call the academy, which is their very sort of new talent analysts and so on. So I work sort of bringing them on, as well as I do one-to-one coaching with the senior board and so on. Team coaching, action learning sets. This was a big thing post-COVID. So as people started going back to work, was kind of team development sessions. I'm also an expert witness. So where there's employment decisions to be made. So if somebody's getting divorced, somebody's ex-spouse might be claiming, oh, I don't need to give her any maintenance, she can, you know, go and train as a nurse and she'll be making 80,000 a year. I'll be brought in as an independent witness to work with the individual, build up their interpersonal, intellectual and personal portrait, and then start looking at realistically, you know, what will be the trajectory of this individual. And then that's kind of put into the mix when they're deciding on settlement, or if someone's had injury at work. So how has this affected their work? I had a very interesting one recently where somebody had actually won a tribunal case against her past employer. So I was brought in to look at the stigma that her having taken her past employer to work would actually have on her career. So in financial terms, how was that going to set her back? And then, of course, also, if someone's disputing a selection decision, then I'll be brought in as a expert witness to look at, you know, whether the people had the right training in the tools, were they the right tools, were they reliable, was there some sort of bias going on, you know, all the situations you can imagine. So I've done, you know, this is pretty much covering what I do at the moment. And
that's my favorite.
And I do it through a number of means. Have I gone over in time?
No, please carry on, Rachel. It's absolutely fascinating.
So as you said, I started Rachel Frost Limited in '98, and I've had some fairly large contracts. So I've had at one stage 20 associates working on one particular government contract. I don't tend to do that nowadays. It's just too tiring and too stressful. So now I will be associates to other people. No problem with that at all. As I say, I can work in-house. So for the venture capital firm, I work on a retainer basis, one day a week actually, and then they pay me extra for extra work that I do as it comes up. But whatever happens, they pay me for that 4 days a month. I've also worked as a contractor for government departments before. So my original career was, I was a principal psychologist for the Cabinet Office. So that was what I did prior to starting my own business. So obviously I was in-house then. And I go in and out of government at the moment. So if their occupational psychologist leaves, then I'll go in and fill the gap for however long till they recruit a new one. I do quite a lot of partnership working. So as I said, I've got this partnership with Hographer. I also work with headhunters. So a number of headhunters will ask me to look at their candidates. Business schools, so a couple of business schools I sort of work closely with as well. Then I've got sort of loose affiliations. So the work I'm doing with Azerbaijan is actually what's called technical, I think it's called technical assistance. So they're sort of UNDP type projects, which various companies bid for. So I've got affiliation with some of them. And as I said, my CV seems to be floating around. So people will contact me and it will just be a one-off. And then all sorts of mishmash, different ways of doing things. I'm going to take this down. So that's me. That's what I do.
Rachel, absolutely fascinating and enlightening. I'm absolutely seeing a theme here. I'm sure everyone else on the call is, and that is variety, and just how many opportunities that this field has opened up and allowed you to walk through that door and try that and be a bit of that and do that. How fantastic to see that visually and to understand what you do. There's no such thing as on a daily basis, obviously, but thank you so much for walking us through that. I'm going to keep things going and introduce our next speaker, Vijai Pandey. Vijay has held a variety of roles, including Director of R&D, various senior consulting positions, advising and facilitating psychometric testing, competency mapping, recruitment, talent identification, development. He's consulted for the National Centre of Assessment, helping to improve their systems and processes of test development. For 10 years, Vijay was the head of consulting and coaching at Lena Research and Consulting, and he's now currently a global talent consultant. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And well, I don't see much to kind of add to in terms of what is already covered by Almuth, Sakshi, and Rachel. In fact, I'm still in awe of what Rachel presented, and I like that idea of one slide presentation, and I think I'll steal that from you, Rachel. So next time I'll use like that, because I hate PowerPoints. I don't like them. And if I become one day like, the libertarian pattern list, as the nudge author says, I will ban PowerPoint. But this idea, like a mind map, I liked it very much.
Perhaps, Vijay, you could tell us, maybe we could delve more into the detail of the day-to-day, so that we can get a really good understanding of the process of a consultation and what that really means for you as an individual.
Yeah, so basically I have been asked this question multiple times, like Sakshi was talking about it, that what do you do? And now I have found a way to kind of simply put it, that I help companies identify talent, develop talent, and engage talent, so that they don't leave. And this is the core. But then this process of identification can be done at intrapersonal level. It can be done at interpersonal level. So at interpersonal level, I apply this process in coaching. I do a lot of coaching, a lot of career guidance for mid-career professionals who have, let's say, worked 15, 20 years in a particular line, and then now they are dissatisfied with this, or they hit a kind of ceiling and they want to kind of break that and go and do something else. So they are referred to me generally through my network, and then I work with them to identification part of doing this process within the individual. Then this identification process also happens at interpersonal level. And a fair bit of my career, like I have been working for like 16 years now, and a fair bit of it I have done marriage counseling. And actually I stopped marriage counseling when I got married. So then I said, okay, I will not do counseling anymore. Purpose achieved. So I have done a lot of marriage counseling, like approximately 3,000 couples. And it started as on an Excel sheet, because in those times they were not, Gmail was just arriving when I was starting marriage counseling. So it was on Excel sheet. And then I started kind of matching people, in the college, that, who is matching with who. And I was like a kind of Tinder on Excel. So yeah, so it happens, the identification process, like who is the best person for me, or who is the, a person fit for me, that question. So I used to help people answer that question systematically through the, knowledge of psychology. And then this happens at group level, intergroup relations. It happens at organizational level, that I'm witnessing now while working with HSBC. It's not about how brilliant individually you are, but it's about how two groups in the organization kind of get into relationship with each other and work for a common objective, and how you as an individual consultant can facilitate that process. So it's like I be in the background most of the time, and I talk to one person at a time. And then we create some interventions which are largely kind of not very publicized, not very announced, but they're effective in the sense that they are designed for a purpose. They're supposed to be fit for a purpose and bring the result. So this identification of whether individual objective, personal objective, interpersonal relationships and all. So that's the work I have done quite a bit. I'm still continuing doing. The second is development. Now, we have a very old saying that anybody can be anything, which is true, but then nobody can be everything. And two of the first speakers, they were very good at dancing, like they were very good at performing arts. Me and performing art are like India and North America. They are as far. So like, and you know, when my hand moves, my legs don't move. If my head is moving, my hands will not move. So it's crazy. And there is no coordination in my body, for example. So totally a misfit for any kind of performing arts. And I'm the example that you can be a very good psychologist without being a performing artist. So, so yeah, so development, like, you know, when it is profitable or when it makes sense to invest in your development and in what direction. So yes, theoretically, if I really practice, I can be a good dancer, potentially. But then is it wise for me to kind of invest and go into that line? I help individuals figure out that decision or figure out the, you know, how to make decision on that. I help groups figure out that. I help organizations figure out that, and a larger structure figure out that. And the third is engaging, like how we enter into a relationship, how we maintain that relationship, how we develop that relationship, and how we part that relationship, how we end a relationship. So that's like overall the work I'm doing. Now, coming to day-to-day technical work, I have always worked on intersectionality. Like, it's never about only psychology. It's about psychology mixing with something else. So in the beginning, my practice of psychology was mixed with recruitment. Then my practice of psychology was mixed with government policies. I worked for 3.5 years in Saudi Arabia, and my job was to set up an assessment system and process and help them develop tests in Arabic language, which will be used for identifying the, let's say, top talent nationally, send them abroad for education, and then get them back to contribute to the country. It was a big project. And I'm very happy that the benefit of that project, the country is seeing now. Like after 4 or 5 years, I still get feedback, I still get messages from the Minister of Civil Services where I worked. And Saudi Arabia being a monarchist country, like minister is still the minister. So there is no change in the top echelon of the society. So like the intersectionality, working with applying psychology to government policies. And currently here in HSBC, I'm applying psychology to risk mitigation. As Rachel was talking about that, she does when an employment case goes to the court, she does the evaluation whether the tests were used properly, whether the people were trained. Here, my job is to make sure that the case does not go to the court. And if the case goes to the court, we can provide enough evidence that as an organization, we are doing everything right. And to make sure, I do a lot of advocacy within the organization. I do run a lot of validity study. I do large scale data modeling. I do a lot of what we call as algorithmic identification, which some people term as artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I make those models. I run it on, and we have roughly 500,000 candidates applying every year. And I have data on like 4 to 5 million candidates from all over the world. And we cannot go and look at any individual profile. So I train my bots, I train machines to read them, understand them, and then give us the information in processed manner so that we can use that information to draw some insights. So that's the kind of intersectionality between psychology and technology, or let's say psychology and IT skill. I have done a lot of test development, like more than a dozen personality tests. Some of them one of them is accredited by BPS, and all of them are accredited by Indian Institute of Business Psychology. I also do, like Rachel, I do training for BPS accreditation level 1 and 2. with Aston Business Psychology. So that's the, like, that's in kind of nutshell, that's what I do.
Wow.
And
yeah, that's a huge nutshell. Absolutely fascinating again, Vijay, and continuing that theme of variety and it's differences in this project and that project and the different things that you can apply your knowledge and yourself to is absolutely an eye-opener. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm going to keep things moving on because I'm cognizant of time going on.
Yeah, and if you guys have questions, please put it in the chat box.
Yeah,
I'm better at actually answering chat and emails than, yeah, and I would be happy to even talk about in the comment session, in the group session.
Great.
Sure.
Throw those questions into the chat. Please do. Thank you so much. Let's move on to our fifth fantastic and established speaker, Kaemorine Prendergast. Kaemorine has provided services for a variety of businesses and helps to provide solutions for organizations to create more inclusive cultures, designing, training, and assessing and developing leadership. She predominantly works with tech companies, supporting senior leaders and C-suite as an organizational psychologist and executive coach. She's providing training and coaching projects cross-culturally across a wide variety of sectors. So this is really interesting, helping organizations maximizing performance through skillful delivery of coaching, training, and assessments. She's passionate about diversity, equality, inclusion, helping BME professionals show up more authentically, navigate the workplace racism, and enhance performance. Kaemorine, what a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. So when I was thinking about what I would say, because again, there's a theme of variety in my kind of career trajectory, I help people so my day-to-day roles help people to navigate corporate spaces, especially at the intersection of race, gender, and neurodiversity. So I do that individually with leaders to help them to level up their, careers in tech, because tech is very non-tradition in terms of, like, if you had worked in a banking organization, which I've done, and they have very kind of traditional standardized structures and processes that they go through in terms of how they develop their leaders, whereas tech companies, they grow like this and then they build out the people part of it later on. So then again, obviously that causes a lot of sometimes friction and obviously just different approaches, because tech obviously is very much looking at things and technology and AI, and then it's a very different skill set to leading people and managing people. So let me start by giving you kind of an insight into a day-to-day. So at the moment, I'm working with two clients. One of them is a very large tech company. They're $1 billion tech company. They're based in Canada. They have entities all over the world. I coach and help to develop their senior leaders and their C-suite to, again, lead multinational complex teams, and then also design and deliver training as well to help them to lead more inclusively, because again, they've grown so massively and they've not had the kind of infrastructure to help to develop their teams. The other company I'm working with is a very traditional government organization. So not only tech, but they are based in the UK, and for them, I do a lot of leadership development. So if I'm thinking about the kind of key things I do is definitely around coaching, a lot of coaching, more so than I have in the last, say, 2 years. And I think that's to do a lot with kind of trends that I'm seeing in the pandemic, where people are coming back into work, they're working remotely, they're in hybrid models, and some of them are struggling with, working with in a remote environment and then not having that interaction and connection. And then also, how do you build team cohesion? How do you create psychological safety? How do you lead diverse teams if you're all remote? So these are some of the things that I do. And that can look like me designing a workshop around helping leaders to develop their emotional intelligence and why that is important to help to create psychological safety or to lead their teams. Some of the other things that I have done is delivered neurodiversity awareness sessions. I have, in my previous roles years ago, assessed for dyslexia, so I can do cognitive diagnostic assessments. It's just at the moment that's not the kind of area of my focus. My area is working with neurodiverse professionals that are very senior and helping them to navigate some of the challenges where being neurodiverse and working with neurotypical teams, and especially across cultures, what does that look like? How do I help them to be the best that they can be as leaders and support their teams as well? If I'm thinking about it in terms of like recent projects, because again, I have a portfolio career, so I get bored a lot. So I don't like to do one thing. So you might see that one year I might be doing a lot of designing assessment centers or designing or redesigning their talent, how they bring talent into the business, what assessments they use. The following year, it might be, or the next few months, or at the same time, usually, it might be I'm looking at how minoritized staff are promoted. What are some of the things that could be done to reduce bias? So again, with the psychology piece, I bring a lot of research. I'm far too lazy to do any of my own these days because I'm a mum as well. So I draw on bodies of research, like a lot of things from McKinsey, from Condola, and a lot of the current trends that are in place at the moment around what are the best tools to use, the best approaches to translate that into what I call clean language to leaders that are not psychology based, for them to understand why this is an important approach to take when bringing in people into their businesses, especially when they've had hyper growth and they've had a lot of change. And if you might have seen in the newspaper or in the media lately, tech is going through a lot. So large scale layoffs, unhappy people, and just some pockets of leaders that are not very, ideal. Don't want to say too much in case my client is listening, but, how do we use, for me, my approach has always been, how do I use psychology and research around organizational psychology to make work better for employees and employers, but for employers to be better to their people, because ultimately you need people to grow your organization, to drive innovation, to change. And if you're not creating those inclusive cultures where people feel like they belong, and I did know the figure in this, but I forget, there's a large amount of people in tech that are neurodiverse. So that's what attracted me to that kind of area. And I fell into that by accident as well. It was one of my, I'm bored, I don't want to do this anymore. Let me go and do some, let me look at their talent strategy for Vodafone. So one of the places I've worked is I was at Vodafone, looking at how they assess their high potential talent coming into the business. And then that's when I discovered that there's a lot of neurodiverse professionals. So again, what are some of the things that you need to be aware of in order to ensure that you're not excluding people just because, for example, somebody that might be autistic, that's a super clever senior developer, to a neurotypical person that is not aware, if that person doesn't make eye contact, something as simple as that in an interview, they could then be marked as they're not engaging with the interview. And actually, no, it's not that. What is a different method? What's a different approach? So that's some of the things I did there. I looked at how can we then get coaching for these individuals to help them to rise through the ranks in the organization. Draw on research from Hewlett Packard because they're doing a lot of things, and EY as well at the moment, to support their neurodiverse staff. And so cheekily, I use it to, this is what your competitors are doing, and this is what they're doing that's making them innovative. If you don't do these sorts of things, this is what might happen to your brand reputation. So those are the kind of things that I would do to typically convince a client to take a different, like a more traditional approach to assessing the people that are coming into their business, whereas tech is very much, you can do the technical skills, you're great at this particular role. Yes, we'll put you in charge of a large amount of people and we're going to get you to do that. And these individuals, they code, they know about systems and technology, which is very different to leading multiple people in different countries, across cultures, on different time zones, and all of the issues that brings up. And another area as well that's been a passion and a theme throughout of it is, how can we get more diverse people into these organizations? So tech traditionally is an area where not a lot of women are in senior leadership in tech. There's a large population of neurodiverse people, and there's not a lot of Black people throughout and in different areas in tech. So how do we help to make that more inclusive? So if I think about themes and things that I've done, everything I've done has always been kind of underpinned with how do I use psychology to make things better, but then also how do I use psychology to help people to understand how you can make things more fair and equitable for individuals, that, and how you can get different types of talent coming into your organization, or what could you do to out-innovate your competitors by looking at maybe a different sample. And I think in the last 2 years, it's been so busy. I've done so many different things. So I've worked for research in molecular biology, sorry, my vocab's gone, I've been coaching all day, biological laboratory in Germany, and they're global. They had a lot of scientists, they did a lot of work into, some of it I think was a bit top secret, so I didn't know all of it, but I knew it was a lot of stuff around the vaccines, and they had a lot of different types of scientists and professionals that come together. So one of the kind of key challenges that they were having was, you know, how do we get people to work better together? How do we get the leadership to recognize and reward these individuals when a lot of them are neurodiverse? What could we do differently to ensure that we support these individuals and help them to feel like they belong? So I did work at different levels. So that would look like, usually the client would reach out to me, which I must admit, I'm not like others where I go and say, hey, this is what I do. Would you like some work? So somehow, luckily, I've been lucky enough to get people reach out to me and say, hey, there's a project. I heard that you have done this work. Would you be interested in working on this particular project? And then I meet with that person, have a conversation, find out, you know, what it is that you're trying to achieve. What does you having a neurodiverse diversity awareness mean to you? What is that going to be ultimately for the outcome for your staff? And what do you want people to say about, if any type of intervention? So what would that, you know, look like? And then I go away, traditional approaches, you know, create a proposal, say, hey, this is what I think would work really well. We come back and forth, and then usually I get the project. With the current tech firm I'm working with now, they reached out to me again because of work that I had done through, I don't really know how they found me, but I think I do a lot of work with BME professionals across all sectors. So I did that a lot during the pandemic as well, because in the pandemic, I lost contracts as being an independent contractor. There was things that I had in place that obviously businesses were losing money, so they retracted. And one of the things I did was to help people that were being furloughed or made redundant, you know, help them to kind of plan their career trajectory and navigate some of the challenges that they were having to get new jobs or start businesses. And then from there, I had a lot of referrals, and a lot of these people went on to work in big companies or have quite senior positions, which means that now I'm working with a lot of people that I think were kind of like my past coaches that were from referrals. And this particular tech company that I'm working with now, this is how it happened. So they'd heard that I'd done work with a lot of BME women, helping them to kind of rise in their careers into leadership positions, and kind of wanted me to come in and do the same thing for their people in their organization, the diverse technology staff. And I'm also currently still doing some work with the civil service as well around their fast stream assessment process, which is, I kind of started off, they say, you know, that's like your bread and butter of psychology. When you start off and you don't know how to get in, is doing assessments. And I stopped because it was very much, oh, similar thing. And then I got bored. But I like the civil service because, again, there's a theme of equity and fairness in that they've done a lot of research into how they develop their process so that it's fair and that people they get a diverse range of candidates and a diverse amount of people coming to the business. So I think more or less that's it, really. I don't know if there's anything I've missed. I think I've missed.
That's it. Sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot sometimes, but I like it because I like variety. And I said I get bored. So this helps me to. I'm also neurodiverse as well, so that's probably why I get bored a lot. That's usually why I get bored a lot. But I enjoy working with lots of different clients, just learning about what they do, and also have been traveling a lot this year as well, which is new. Initially, I was like, oh, this is exciting. I get to go to France. And then I've traveled every month, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do it anymore now. I've had enough. But
you can kind of manipulate and choose how much you travel and you spend client side. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That juggling a family and career.
So this past week, I've been in Afrotech. So I don't know if any of you know what Afrotech is, but it's a large technology conference for Black professionals. And it was literally just like a mecca of venture capitalists and founders, senior tech people, just from everywhere. And then I just got to meet, I met so many people that I had coached, and I'd not forgotten, but you just forget names after a while. And it was like, hey, Kaemorine. I was like, oh, wow, I can see how I'm having an impact. And I think a lot of the times when you work independently, you just kind of do the thing, you deliver it. And it's like, we do some, like evaluation piece, but they go next client. And then it's when you meet people and you realize, oh, this is actually really, oh, wow, we need more of this. We need more of people that look like me in these spaces, because traditionally coaching, psychology isn't very diverse. And then there is a lot more diversity now. So how do we, there's a lot of research around when you have a coach that looks like you, when you have a therapist that looks like you, how that helps you to rise in your career. So that's predominantly what I've been doing for the last, say, year and a half, with all bits of other things married into it as well. Sorry, I've gone over time, by the way.
No, I wouldn't dare interrupt. It's so fascinating to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really a whirlwind roller coaster ride through your day to day. Really, really fascinating. We'll move on to our final speaker of the day, and thank you for waiting so patiently, Charlotte. Last but by no means least, we've got Charlotte Axon, who is the lead people scientist at Tailored Thinking, specializing in encouraging, enabling individuals and teams to personalize their work. Charlotte's worked in a variety of HR, inclusion, organization development roles across the higher education sector, having led and supported projects relating to culture, change, inclusion, and recruitment. Charlotte, tell us a little bit about your day-to-day and the specifics about how things work within what you do and your process around that.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate everyone's probably thinking that you just got near the end and then I popped up, so I'll try and keep this as brief as possible for everyone's benefit. So yes, my role at the moment, I'm called a lead people scientist. I spend a lot of time thinking, what does that actually mean, and does that matter? I used to get quite attached to job titles, and then I realized that maybe I could just try not caring as much. But essentially something that someone told me was to think about occupational psychology in terms of the science behind people at work, and as like a triangle of science, people at work, and you kind of can't go wrong, and then you figure the rest out from there. What I'd say a huge part of my personality is less kind of the dramatic performances, which is not my strength at all either, is that I'm really, really nosy. I am really nosy, and I channel my nosiness through occupational psychology as a bit of an excuse to be nosy and ask questions and be curious about people. In a workplace, I say I'm curious, but most people that know me will say I'm really nosy, and I'm absolutely comfortable with that. It's who I am, and it's what makes me interested in people at work. So what I do in my current role as a lead people scientist, I work at Positive Psychology and HR Consultancy. We're a really small consultancy based in Durham. I'm less than a year into this role, so it still feels fairly new to me, but I love it and it's really fun. And I've found out that that's actually really important. So what we do as a company, a lot of what our work is founded on is job crafting. I know someone else on the call mentioned career crafting. It's this idea that we can make small but tangible changes to our roles, the way that we do our work, in order to make them a better fit. A really good analogy I find is thinking about a semi-tailored suit jacket. So you might buy a suit jacket from a store. You might think, oh, some different buttons on, put a badge on, maybe pull up the sleeves a little bit. You're not changing the fundamentals, you're not changing the fabric, you're not changing the entire sizing, but you're just making it a better fit for you. And we all are kind of walking around with these different elements of our lives and our jobs that are personalized, and no two people really go into the same job and do it in exactly the same way. And we embrace that at Tailored Thinking. We're about supporting people to find ways to personalize their work so that it becomes a better fit for them. Interestingly, as an organization, we operate as a 4-day working week, which anyone who wants to talk about that afterwards, I'd love to talk to people more about that from a science perspective and also practical perspective, but I definitely love that. A lot of what I do, yes, is varied. Like everyone has said, variety is really the key theme here. A traditional day, I might be planning, designing workshops around supporting teams and individuals to find ways to craft their work. One-to-one coaching, we do work around leadership development, well-being, and really we try and be evidence-based and evidence-backed, because we recognize that that kind of is easy to lose sometimes in the day-to-day churn of consultancy. I'm trying to think what else I can say in a really short period of time. What I will say is about my journey to getting to this point is that I started working in universities and started working in an internal facing role before I moved to consultancy. I wanted to try both because I was curious about both and I wanted to see which better suited me. The answer is they both have their pros and cons. So for example, what I really like about working internally in a company is that you get to see the impact that your work does much more easily because you're working with the people who you are attempting to have an impact on. Whereas it's harder to get closer to that, I find, in consultancy, where you're working external to organizations, but sometimes that can be a nice thing, that you get to walk away from quite a complex and complicated situation and feel as though, do you know what, I'm glad that I'm not responsible for taking that forward. I can kind of dip in, provide some kind of advice and support and guidance and signpost, and then take a little bit of a step back. So I'd say if you're curious about either, maybe just look for opportunities to explore those two different ways of looking at the occupational psychology world. But like everyone else has said, it's really varied. I don't know anyone from my cohort or other cohorts who've gone into exactly the same line of work. And I think that's a real gift, and we should embrace that, because I definitely found at the beginning of my career, I felt the pressure from, people coming in and doing talks and me feeling like, gosh, these people are really, really successful. How am I ever going to achieve that? And I'm sat here right now and I'm still not even really sure that, what I've achieved, am I really successful? And I decided to just drop those pressures that I put on myself about whether I should be chartered, whether I should be doing this, what label should my job title have? All those pressures that I think is natural to feel and we put on ourselves, and we also feel from the world around us. And I just instead tried to find opportunities for me to craft my work, although I didn't realize I was doing it, and look for ways to bring the skills that you learn from your degree and your experience into the roles that I had. So I never had an occupational psychology role. I never had a role that on paper you would find and think was suitable for an occupational psychologist. But like someone else said on the call, you say yes to stuff and then figure out how to do it later down the line, and that can feel really uncomfortable. But I'd say that's a good piece of advice that I've definitely learned. So yeah, I would say I've done lots of different pieces of work similar to what other people on the call have mentioned, so I won't kind of list them all, but something that I found super helpful is to just give things a go, give things a try, build your network, use your network. People are super, super helpful in this line of work, I find, and the worst thing that can happen is that you reach out to someone and they just don't respond, and it's probably just because they're very, very busy. It's never personal. Figure out why it is that you do what you do. So for me, I believe that everyone should have a positive experience at work. So when I see that not everyone is, which happens, obviously, my desire is to try and change that and support that, whether that's working with people on a local level, or whether it's navigating those kind of organizational barriers and that organizational culture, whether it's looking at trying to dismantle the structures that get in the way of that. That's what I believe firmly in, and that's what drives me, and that is what has led me into the work that I do. And I think the final thing that I just wanted to say in terms of finding your feet and finding your fit, no job is ever going to be perfect, but there are opportunities to shape your job and your kind of career portfolio in a way that best suits you. So I would always encourage people to do that, because that was some of the best advice that I've been given. If you go into a job expecting it to be perfect, unfortunately, you will be disappointed. But there's ways in which you can make it the best that it can ever be for yourself. So maybe approaching things with curiosity, fun, and an opportunity to learn about people, I'd say is something that I've learned very recently. Happy to take any questions, but really conscious of not using up more time than I've been allocated.
Charlotte, that was extremely insightful, I think, and I thought it was really, really helpful. I'm sure that many people on the call thought that too. I really liked the job crafting aspect of it, finding out what it is that you like, investigating what you like, you know, and just taking the time to explore that and speak to people and connect with people. You're absolutely right. Everyone that I've sort of linked up with or had the pleasure of speaking to on LinkedIn or in person, it's always been really responsive and helpful. and you know, like, it's quite surprising to me. I've spent so many years working in a customer facing role in retail and in here and there, that I'm always still naturally shocked when people are just instinctively nice in response. It's so refreshing. So yeah, it's an excellent piece of advice. What we can do now, for anyone who still wants to hang on just for 5 minutes more, is pop any questions into the chat if you have the questions. If you want to unmute yourself, go right ahead and jump in and ask a question. And I will revert back to my co-host, Nikita.
Excellent. So, good people, just feel free to unmute and let's have a chat. So, does anybody have any questions for anybody, or just generally about the meaning of life, etc.? I think we're at this point where we can discuss that.
I would like to just highlight one point which Charlotte said, that most people are actually helpful. And in my experience, I have found that the higher you go in the hierarchy, the more people have time and the more they are helpful, which goes counterintuitive, because we think that people who are CEOs, they don't have time. They are so much busy with other. No, they have a lot of time and they are helpful. So in my experience, like, if I have a problem, I will try to kind of approach the most knowledgeable person who is supposed to be super busy with that. And most of the time I got amazing response. Like, I got a very good response in the year 2004 from Dave Bartram. And he was a chief psychologist as SHL at that time. And it was beyond my reach, but I had his email ID. I wrote to him, and within 24 hours, he replied. And since then, we became like a pen pal. And, you know, it's amazing. We did some projects together, and it was amazing working with him.
Lovely, lovely.
So just take like, and someone was asking like how to launch. That was one of the things in the survey, like how to launch yourself. Just ask people. Like, if you want to go into a particular line, just identify who are the best people in that line and write to them. And you will be surprised that most people are actually helpful and responsive.
Thank you. Yeah. There was a question from Sonia. I don't know if Sonia's still on the call, but hopefully we'll try and get an answer from our team. It was posted whilst Kaemorine was talking, but of course it's open to absolutely everybody. What would be the ways you ensure diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism in virtual/remote teams? Big question. We could spend an entire session probably on
that. So one of the things that I've been doing is around cultural competency. So you can't tackle everything because it's remote, and then there's just people don't have enough time. So the kind of area that I thought, you know, was coming up most problematic was the communication. So we're all working in a remote organization. The organization I'm working with, they're fully remote. They're spread across Europe, APAC, and North America. And then there's managers that are managing diverse teams from all of those regions. How do you ensure that they feel like they're included and that they belong, and that, you know, how do you ensure that the way you communicate, because there's differences in the way how communication is received across different cultures, and that could impact how people work together and how people communicate with each other, and then ultimately team cohesion. So I ask a lot of questions. I spend a lot of time with the kind of senior leaders of the different regions to understand what it is that are some of the challenges that they're facing in terms of people feeling, you know, psychologically safe, people being authentic and bringing this, you know, you can't bring your whole authentic self to work, but how can you make sure that your experience at work is you not masking? So for example, somebody that's neurodiverse, they may, tone down aspects of their behavior or their neurodivergence to fit in. Somebody that is, like a woman in a particularly male environment might experience different types of microaggressions. How do we ensure that people understand that that's happening? Because if you're part of the dominant group, more often than not, you're not aware of these things going on. So I do that through education. So initially, any kind of discussion I have with managers or with the senior people about things that they want as in terms of outcome, I always start at a level of, okay, so how do we increase your awareness for certain things? So if I'm thinking of a recent session I did, it was a kind of piece around just literally like differences in culture and how that impacts how you challenge leadership, how you speak to people that are much more senior to you, how you receive communication. And that was just, to us, because we did all the research, we look at, we know this because we're psychologists, but then to somebody that doesn't work in this field, you wouldn't think that. You just be like, all right, we're all on Zoom, we're all here, we're all present, we're all diverse, but actually, no, are we included? Do we feel like we belong? So I think I've gone off on a tangent here, but I think I very much, ask a lot. So my approach is asking a lot of questions to understand what it is, the outcome that manager or that lead wants, or that head off that they want, and then speaking to the individuals as well to understand what a good outcome would be. And then any kind of intervention that I design, I always do something like called clean setup, which comes from clean language, which is, what would you like to have happen? What would that look like? And then to use that as a setup to kind of proceed with the session. But a lot of it is bringing in models of culture, models of research around microaggressions and how that impacts people and how that impacts how they show up at work, how stereotype threat impacts someone, how they perform on a job, to create awareness for people that wouldn't experience that, and then also to advocate for those that do, and then they have a discussion around that. I don't know if that answered the question. I hope it did.
I think so. Wonderful, really inspiring also. What I think we can do now, for those who are still lingering on, that really is a self-selecting sample. Well done, and thank you. Is we'll do two things. We can split into some groups so that you guys can network with each other, discuss what's just been talked about for the last hour and a half. What have you learned? What takeaways are you going to leave this with? But before we do that, we're going to say thank you so much to our speakers who have just been absolutely marvelous, volunteering their time to speak about what they do because they're passionate about it. Thank you so much. A big round of applause to everyone here who attended. I'm going to hand over to Nikita now, who's going to be able to break people into groups. We'll say thank you to the speakers and farewell. And thanks for joining, everyone. Spend as long as you like.
And thank you so much, Nikita and Simon, for organizing it, because it's a great service you are doing for the upcoming psychologists, for established people, for people who are thinking of psychology as a second career. It's an amazing thing that you guys are doing, and I'm always in awe of you people. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
It's a pleasure because there's so many good people who volunteered to be speakers. Yeah. It's amazing that all 6 of you turned up as well, which is just amazing. So hopefully everybody
it's statistically rare also.
Yeah, it's also quite fun. So I would just love to know, just before we break into little breakout rooms and all that, could you just go into Menti and just type in what were the key takeaways for you today? Because it's very useful for us to know what was actually useful to you. All of you. Speakers can join too, because I definitely had some takeaways. I mean, the breadth of OxPsych is always surprising, and just the variety of organizations you get to work with. And I mean, I once was working with a bunch of rocket scientists, and I couldn't resist a joke. All this validity, reliability of psychometrics, it's not rocket science, is it? And one of the rocket scientists stood up and said, rocket science is easy, the people that are hard. So it's all relative. So, yes, Vijay.
I had the same comment from director of IIT Guwahati. IIT is Indian Institute of Technology. He said that the work that you guys do is like, hitting a moving target while you yourself is moving all the time. So it's very difficult to measure anything in human psyche because your measurement is moving, the object is moving. and still you guys managed to have 0.3 predictive validity. That's huge. So yeah, it's
personally, I wouldn't want to do any other work because it's just the variety of it. I mean, humans are just amazing. The fact we can communicate at all between each other is just mind-boggling. So, and it's brilliant. It's great to see the takeaways. It's great to see the Sakshi's point about saying yes and figuring this later landed. I can definitely resonate with this. Within 1 year, I was the only psychologist after starting out my first job, and I had to say yes to everything because there was nobody else to delegate to. And I have to say it was some of the best experiences ever. Yeah, there's so many different roles. Don't worry about titles. Yeah, and that's the key thing. It's so hard to find an OCPSych role. But if you look for occupational psychology in jobs, just the title, just the words, or industrial psychology, business psychology, you'll just see how many jobs have it, because I feel, especially in the last 5 years, there's been more value to occupational and business psychologists than ever before. But the job titles are really strange and wonderful, like, you know, specialist in culture integration. But hey, it's still an OCPSych role. Finding out different roles, the real life experiences, absolutely, and it's brilliant to share this. I mean, we must have had decades of experience on this call today alone, seeing the amazing people and knowing about the great work they are doing. Fabulous. But the key thing is, it is about variety, it is about support, and it is about connections. So make sure to connect with each other on LinkedIn, and we'll just put you into like little chat groups for 10 minutes so you can get to meet some of the wonderful people from today and just have a chat, and then we'll bring you back at 12:30 and we'll close the session. But on this note, thank you again to all our wonderful speakers, all of you who've decided to join us this evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you, Simon, for facilitating a beautiful session.
Pleasure. Bye, everyone.